America are actively preparing for war with China.
China's the number one national security threat to the United States.
Over 30,000 Chinese migrants have entered. We are anticipating some kind of conflict.
A lot of Americans and Australians and British including seem to want to put their head in the sand and pretend this problem doesn't exist. I think it has come to the point that somebody needs to stand up and address the problem. And it's no secret, if you've watched my channel anytime, you know I got a serious issue with the Chinese. My issues are numerous, not the least of which is the crap they produce. And it is crap. My problem with the Chinese more than anything is they're a hostile country towards the United States, towards Australia, towards England. They have people they're putting in our countries which are hostile towards the system. They threaten war all the time. They threaten Taiwan all the time. And they just released a statement regarding Taiwan. But I want to make clear something that's the problem here. The problem, in my mind, isn't so much that China is doing this. It doesn't surprise me. The problem is that Americans and Australians and British are turning a cold shoulder to it and ignoring it. And that's a problem. Added to this is the use of slave labor in their factories to produce things like that magnetic chuck there. And I've had conversations with people in the YouTube verse about this. Not any of my subscribers. I mean, this isn't really aimed at any subscribers that I have particularly, but there are other channels where I've had these conversations and my issues with China gets brushed off and sometimes even laughed at. And it's not a laughing matter to me. It's extremely serious, and it should be extremely serious to you as well. I have a problem when everybody agrees to say how terrible Auschwitz and Birkenau and Dachau and all these concentration camps were, and yet have no problem buying from the Chinese, who are operating very similar camps with a very similar purpose. Auschwitz and Dachau and Mauthausen and all these different concentration camps that the Germans utilized during the war were primarily forced labor. These people were put to work in factories, and when they weren't useful anymore, the people were put to death. So we have a bit of hypocrisy going on here where we say this is bad, but this is okay. The Chinese exploit their workers, their paid workers. They forcefully remove people, young people, out of their rural communities and family farms and remote parts of China and bring them into the city, and they force them to work excruciatingly long hours in these factories. They have to keep a production quota above a certain percentile, and they're punished if they go below that. The use of dissidents and criminals and the use of their dissidents as slave labor, in addition to using North Koreans. The North Korea government farms out their people, and these factories pay the Kims in North Korea for the slave labor. And the North Koreans hold their families hostage so that they don't escape, so that they do their work. They have camps that they have to go back to every day, and they're only paid enough money for a little bit of food, a little bit of cigarettes, and some alcohol, and that's it. The rest of the money goes to the Kims. And this is not just in China. The North Koreans farm out their people in Malaysia too. There's a lot of restaurants and factories in Malaysia where North Koreans are working as slave labor. But China is by far the largest user of slave labor. Not to mention North Koreans that defect, which the Chinese are actually fine with, but they take those defectors and they, again, use them as slaves under threat of returning them to North Korea. a lot of the females are put into prostitution and other types of human trafficking. So this is the issue that I'm having when Americans and Australians and British are buying this stuff and they make excuses for buying it. Well, I'm just a hobbyist. I don't really want to spend all the money on the new stuff. Or you've got some people that seem to come out of Harbor Freight like they just had a cocaine injection. They're just in a state of euphoria with all the cheap stuff they got. And then they're jumping all over their YouTube channel, making videos. Oh, look what I got for next to nothing. Ha ha ha. And when it's broke, I'll just take it back for another. Ha ha ha. So the issue, more than anything, is that China is an enemy of the United States and Australia and Britain. And the short answer when you're buying Chinese is that you're becoming a traitor to your own country. And whether or not you want to hear that, I'm sorry, I can't help it. But if you're actively engaging in that kind of activity, your money, your dollars, you're willingly spending and giving it to a country that is your enemy that wants to destroy you and your country. And this is no joke. It's not a joke. And the continual threats against Taiwan, and they've made it clear that they are going to take Taiwan. And when that happens, we are going to be in a state of war with China. It's kind of amazing to me that everybody can get behind, the Bud Light boycott, but nobody can get behind boycotting China. And I understand how difficult the corporations have made it and they're farming this stuff out, but you know what? I don't care. Again, Bud Light, everybody in America put the screws to Bud Light and it worked. Okay, so you can't tell me that this wouldn't work with our corporations. About 10% of the things in my shop have come from China. Everything else has come from America, Europe, Japan, or Taiwan, or Korea, South Korea. I've made it a point to not buy Chinese as much as possible, except under extenuating circumstances, because I'm trying to be realistic about this situation. I understand there are situations when you need to buy something from China, either because you just can't find it made anywhere else, or like when I had to buy that chuck there, I just don't have $2,500, but at the same time, I'm only buying Chinese when I absolutely am up against the wall and I have no other choice. This is what I'm trying to say, is that your money is building their military, which they're going to use, and they are using right now, in attacking our country. Those Chinese that are coming across the border are no doubt being sent here on purpose by the Chinese government. And it's not hard to assume what their activities will be if America and China does go to war.
CBP data shows that over 30,000 Chinese migrants have entered California since October. That is an 8,600% increase since fiscal year 2021. Florida Congressman Greg Steube joins me now. Congressman, first, your reaction to that absolutely astounding figure.
Yeah, China's the #1 national security threat to the United States. It would not be surprising that your enemies are going to look to ways to thwart your defenses. Why not send 30,000 people, military-age males, operatives into the United States? Because they all know, the entire world knows, that our border is wide open. You add that onto the 20,000 that have come in since Joe Biden's been president. It's over 50,000 Chinese Communist Party individuals that are in our country that I'm sure are communicating with one another. That's on top of the 30-something thousand Russians, people from Afghanistan, you name it, all over across the world. Our enemies realize that our southern border is wide open and they're going to take every advantage and exploit it.
So to be clear, Congressman, you do not believe that these 30,000 Chinese are here simply for a better life. You think there is something else behind the scenes to them being here.
No, absolutely not. And look at the number. I mean, 30,000 just since October. And if you look at that compared to the number in the last 3 years, there was only 25,000 since Joe Biden took office. So they're seeing that they're able to work with the cartels in Mexico to get operatives into our country. It's not a coincidence. Our enemies see the failures of Joe Biden at the southern border and the failures of him on national security issues and see this as an opening to get operatives into the country. There's other nations all across the world that are doing it. There's Iranians that have come into our country, people from all over the world that hate us that are coming here to do us harm, and Joe Biden is doing absolutely nothing about it. And in fact, he's encouraging it. He's taken 64 executive actions since he's been president to open up the southern border for political purposes.
We are going to go to war because China has made that clear. China has made it clear they're going to attack Taiwan. And when they do, we are going to defend Taiwan and we will be at war with China. So when you spend your money so gleefully, and I'm addressing those channels that I've come across and other people that's all they do is buy Chinese garbage all day long. And I'm also saying that everybody should cut back as much as possible and start boycotting the Chinese and letting the corporations know this has to stop. Now, our country has a lot of internal issues and we're already divided on a lot of things. And a lot of good Americans are doing nothing about it as that stands, which is pretty sickening to me as it is. I was raised around the Depression era, World War II generation in my hometown. My grandparents were Depression era, World War II generation. They would not have tolerated this if this had been going on in their time. And I have a problem tolerating it. And I have a problem watching Americans tolerate it and people making excuses for it. It's wrong. And no matter what our problems are internally, this is still your country. This is still my country. Right, wrong, or otherwise, this is our country. And I think at the very least, Americans, Australians, and British need to stop funding and supporting a hostile communist entity that has made it clear they're going to destroy our countries. And it's not a laughing matter anymore. That's what I have to say. Y'all can laugh at me and mock me all you want. I don't care. You're not going to be laughing or mocking when this finally happens. And this isn't something that's going to happen 20, 30, 40 years down the road. And even if it does, so what? What difference does it make? There's a lot of people that we call heroes for standing up to tyrants and bullies, and I'm standing up and calling the spade a spade. So let's stop the hypocrisy. Let's stop supporting an enemy that wants to destroy our country and that is in the active process of doing so right now. That's all I have to say.